I've always been blogging about different things, this and that, but really when it came to travel, that and taking pictures, so I have an Instagram too that's full of travel pictures, and then a blog that's full of travel stories. I just loved it.
Hi, I'm Ebony, and I believe that stories change lives, and everyone has a story worth telling. Sometimes, unfortunately, we let our self-doubt get in the way of us writing our stories and sharing our stories. So that's why I created Motivation to Write as a source of motivation and inspiration to help writers like you and me share our stories with the world. So I talk to the experts ranging from entrepreneurs to marketers to authors to therapists to psychologists who share their knowledge and their advice to help writers like you and me step into our full potential. Lisa Dailey is a travel writer, publisher, web designer, and author of Square Up, 50,000 Miles in Search of a Way Home. After traveling with her family worldwide, she repurposed her travel blog, documenting their adventures, into a memoir. Although the journey from blog to book wasn't easy, Lisa learned valuable lessons she now uses to guide writers through the publishing process at Sidekick Press. Lisa is currently working on a soup anthology and a novel. Hello, Lisa Dailey. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. And I'm excited to have you because you're a travel writer, really.
I am. Yep. I am a travel writer.
And you also, you're the owner of Sidekick and Silent Press.
Sidekick Press.
I'm sorry.
That's right.
Silent Sidekick and Silent Press.
Sidekick Press.
Oh,
I know it gets confusing in there. It's all right.
I'm a little slow. Sidekick Press.
Right. Yep.
Okay. That actually sounds a little bit more promising than Silent Press.
Yeah. That would be bad, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So I was actually reading through your blogs, and you have quite a story. Pretty amazing story. So Lisa, can you maybe just give us a little bit of background as to how you got into this space as a travel writer?
Yes. So I've always loved travel, and when I met my husband, that was one of the things that we shared a great passion for. And so we traveled all around the United States. We traveled, to a couple, off the beaten path places, but hadn't done any like major international travel. And then we had kids, which slowed us down a little bit, but we still traveled around the US. And then when they were about 8 and 10, we decided to embark on a big trip to New Zealand for 2 weeks. We thought it would be a good test with them at 8 and 10 to see how well they traveled. And it was wonderful. And it was during the Vancouver 2010 Winter Olympics. And we were watching the Olympics in New Zealand and just thought how fascinating it would be to take our kids around the world. And so we set this goal to plan to take our kids around the world in 2015. So we had a 5-year goal, and we did. And I've always been blogging about different things, this and that, but really when it came to travel, that and taking pictures, so I have an Instagram too that's full of travel pictures, and then a blog that's full of travel stories. I just loved it. I just fell in love with the process. It's a great way to record everything that I've done, a great way to, keep those memories alive for my kids even, and just have kind of gained a little bit of a following there and actually, I'm just coming back today. I've been gone for a week. So today's my first day back in my office here as well.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Where are you coming from?
So I live in Washington State, but I just traveled down to Nevada and Arizona to see some family because I was finally vaccinated and missing humans.
Yes, yes. It's wonderful. Yeah, I was vaccinated recently also. It's great to be able to actually see people in person.
And to hug people. Just hug people again. Yeah, it was lovely. That's wonderful.
So were you writing prior to this?
Yeah, I've always been a writer, and I've always had a dream. I mean, for about 25 years, I've had this story rumbling around in my head, and it's a work of fiction. And I really thought that would be my first book. And then right before we took this trip around the world, I had a series of losses where 7 family members died within the span of 5 years, including my mother and father and 23-year-old brother and my father-in-law. And it was pretty devastating for me. And when I came back, I think I needed a way to process all that. And what evolved was this travel memoir that kind of also kind of narrates my journey through the grieving process.
Mm. So while you were traveling that first initial trip to New Zealand,
Mhm.
were you actually journaling during the trip, or how did you keep record of things?
Yep, I've always been a journaler. So it wasn't always necessarily online, but yes, for sure. I journal about everything because I always like to keep track of the places that we've been and the names of places. So when we get back and people say, "Where'd you go?"
Right.
I have some sort of reference because there's, it gets lost in the shuffle eventually.
Right, yeah. And when I think of travel writers, actually, I'm watching on PBS this amazing documentary on Ernest Hemingway.
Oh, I've heard of it. I have not seen
Yes.
it. What the place that we were staying at down in Arizona, they started watching it, just the
Mm,
very beginnings of it. But yeah, I saw that. Is it
yeah,
good?
yeah, and I forgot that he was basically a travel writer. I mean, he wrote fiction, but he also wrote nonfiction. He liked to travel to Spain and Africa and Paris, and so. And I think of Melissa Gilbert, Eat, Pray, Love was like the most popular, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's such, especially after having watched this documentary of Ernest Hemingway and having read Cheryl Strayed also, right? Cheryl
Mhm.
Strayed, Melissa Gilbert. It's such a cathartic experience. At least it seems like a cathartic experience to travel, experience different cultures, put yourself in a different context, and at the same time it's being able to process your own pain, right? Because it was
Mhm.
like Melissa Gilbert, her divorce, Cheryl Strait, her divorce. Ernest Hemingway had a slew of issues. So was it a cathartic? I mean, it had to have been like a
I
cathartic
I
experience.
think it was, and I don't think I fully realized it at the time.
Yeah.
But it was definitely, I'm a pretty type A personality. I'm someone who gets things done. I'm someone who knows, I have a schedule. I know everything that's going to get done. And to be hit with kind of loss after loss really threw me out of my sort of everyday behavior. And so being able to kind of step back and step away from my normal life and just go out and experience the world was was healing in its own right. And I think it allowed me the time and the space to kind of really work through that grief. And there were so many experiences as I came home and I wrote the book and I reflected on those, that they really were an aid in kind of making my way through some of that grief. I look
Mhm.
at some of those experiences and I write about it in the book about how, we were in Singapore one time and we were pulled um, to this meditation space because a monk wanted to do a blessing for us. And just
Mm.
even that process, I found later was much more impactful than it might have been in the moment. But yeah, for sure. It really kind of gave me that space and time to work through some of that.
How was that meditation?
It was amazing. It was incredible. I mean, he had us kneel and place beads on our head, around our necks, and kind of went through, and the guide asked our names, and then he did this chant for us, like sitting right in front of us, this in this prayerful meditation space, and it was really impactful.
Mm. Are you a meditator?
A little bit. I like to say I try. I have kind of a busy brain, so I know that it's not about, just being calm and you always come back, but
Right.
I my brain is a little busy. But
Yeah.
I do try.
Yeah. Sometimes the process, I mean, if you get into the zone of writing, it can be like a meditation.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So, how long did it take? Because you recently published your book, right?
Correct. Yep.
And how long did that take to write that book?
So what I did initially is I pulled all of the blog posts that I had written, and as we traveled, we were out of the country for 7 months, and I blogged about every location that we went and everything that we experienced. So we visited probably, I think, 14 countries and 80 different locations within those countries, and so I pulled all of that together and put it all as one big Word document. And I was like, "Oh, this is really terrible. This doesn't make a book." And so I I then sought out some more direction, and I kind of found my narrative arc, and I found, the travel story, but then also the narrator's story throughout, and then crafted it towards that. And I went through a couple of writing programs that really helped me shape it.
Mm-hmm.
And all in all, it took about 5 years.
Mm.
But it went through many, many, many revisions in those 5 years.
Right. Okay. So tell us, because there are a lot of people that want to publish a book,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're not even sure quite where to start. I mean, a lot of people have trouble just figuring out what to write about. That didn't seem to be an issue for you. So you had the material. You went through the 5-year process of writing, revising. Did you have like people read through it?
I did. So I went through this program called the Narrative Project, 9-month Get Your Book Done program, and
Mm.
shaped all those blog posts into a narrative arc. And then I went through another sort of series of critique and revision and critique and revision. Then I got a developmental editor who went through, and I made changes again, and then went through critique and revision one more time
Right. Right. Yeah.
till
Yeah.
I finally felt like, okay, this is done as much as it's going to be done. I don't think there's ever any point of done until you just decide to call it a day.
Right.
Um, and as far as publishing, my publishing business is pretty new. And when I first started down this road, I kind of thought that I would, try and seek traditional publishing. Memoir is a little bit difficult on that. I mean, you really have to have sort of a basis and a platform built.
Yeah.
And the more that I read about it, the more, I really thought that I would go with a smaller press. And then a couple of years ago, I had worked sort of with another publisher in getting books ready to publish, and she was ready to retire. And she's like, I'd really like you to take over and buy the company. So I
Hmm.
did. And then I published my own book.
Okay.
So it was, I mean, and I've done that for several years, but when it came to publishing my own, it was definitely the right decision for me. So.
Ah. Is it more, when you publish your own, do you feel you were a little bit more, what is the word? I want to say harder on yourself. I don't know if that's the right term.
Oh, I think I'm my worst critic
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And do you have photographs in your book?
I do not. I have, I think, when you have photos in a book, it really drives up the cost, especially if they're
Yes.
in color. So I do the official launch on April the 24th through my local bookstore here. And I'll point people towards my travel blog because
Mhm.
that's where really I have all the photos. And there's videos up there of kind of a collage of photos from the trip. So.
That's really cool. That's cool. So tell me, what were, like in this 5-year process of publication, what were the biggest challenges?
I think one of my biggest challenges is when I thought I was done,
Mhm.
and then I sent it to a developmental editor, and she sent me back a 50-page memo of changes she thought I should make, and I
Oh
was
my
like,
gosh.
"Oh,
Oh my
that's
goodness.
really hard."
I know. Yeah. 50 pages? Wow.
Mhm. Yeah.
And did you cry? I started crying.
I don't remember if I cried at the time, but I definitely set the book aside and was like, I can't work on it for a little while. I
Right.
need I need a
Yeah.
break from it. So I actually set it aside for maybe 6 months during that time
Mm.
before I felt like I had the strength to go back in and revise one more time.
Right.
But I'm so glad I did it because I think it's a much better book than I think she was spot on. But
Mm.
sometimes that's hard to hear when you write,
Exactly. Yeah.
she definitely went through, because I write about my relationship with my mother and father, which was not always the best. And she's like, you have to strip out this judgment. Let your scenes tell
Mm.
the story and take out the judgmenty words in there. And that
Mm.
was really hard for me to hear because I didn't see that. So
Right.
having that other perspective to really come in and tell you where you're making some mistakes was helpful.
Yeah,
she
I
was
can.
she was spot on.
Yes, because when you're writing your own story and you're writing from your own experience, you are blinded to your own bias,
Mhm.
and so that can be very tricky. Was it difficult to share like the story of your relationship with your parents, or even like the deaths? Like that takes a lot of vulnerability. How was that experience for you?
I think it was easy in the writing because when you're writing, you're just sort of writing for yourself. I I found that I got a little more nervous as I put it out there into the world, and now
Yeah.
I'm letting everyone see it, and especially relatives, that may not have known my whole story going into things. It does. I do feel a little bit vulnerable about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
at the same time, it's my story. It's not their story. It's my story and what happened to me. So
And so but the blog posts had some of this, like the more, vulnerable material had been posted on blogs already, or no?
not the personal story.
Yeah.
No, the blog posts were really more centered on locations and what we were doing and what we were doing with the kids. Because when we traveled, they were teenagers. So kind of
Yeah.
what we were doing as a family, and
Yeah.
really the locations that we saw.
Have any family members read it yet?
I think so.
Have they said anything?
I'm actually getting good feedback. I'm
Okay.
getting really good feedback. Yeah.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah, that can be, I can imagine that can be very nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Like, ah. Okay. So what, so you didn't have to deal with like rejection letters from other publishers or
I
anything?
did actually. I went
Oh,
through that process. I went through initially to try and do traditional publishing, and so I sent out a, about 50 to 75, query letters and first chapters to agents for representation, and didn't get a lot of feedback.
hmm.
I got some, this sounds great, but it's not the right time.
Hmm.
It's not really in my wheelhouse, even though they published memoir.
Right.
So it's hard if you
Right.
if you want to go through that process. That definitely takes some time, and it definitely takes kind of a thick skin to get through that
Yeah.
rejection process.
Yeah. Did you
Mhm.
have were you just sending query letters on your own, or did you mention an agent? Do you have an agent?
No, I was trying to get an agent.
You're trying to get an agent. Then once you can get an agent, then you can get into like the publishing
Right.
house that you want. Okay, I get
Hmm.
it. Wow. And so just getting an agent was difficult.
Hmm.
That's interesting. Yeah. So what's the biggest lesson you've learned about yourself?
Oh, I think the biggest lesson I've learned about myself was really to look forward and not look so much backward. I think I spent a lot of time worrying about those relationships that really I couldn't do anything about anymore. Everyone, my mom and my dad, and my mom especially, who I had a lot of difficulty with, I couldn't keep replaying that in my head, and had to really move forward and start looking about at what kind of mother I would be to my kids, and knowing definitely what I didn't want to be, and stepping in and being a great mom.
Mm. Have your kids read this yet?
Bits and pieces,
Mm-hmm.
but not the whole thing. No, and I don't really expect them to. They're 19 and 20 now, so
Yeah.
they've
Yeah.
got their own things going on.
Yeah. Were they journaling on during the
Um,
travels?
one son did a video blog that he would send back to his friends. So he didn't, I don't think he posted it anywhere. I might have posted a couple of his videos that he let me post on my blog when we were initially traveling. Um, so he video blogged about different places and I think that he had a couple assignments that he had to turn in, or he was saving them for assignments in school. So.
Mm-hmm. And your friends, have your friends read it?
Mhm. Yes, in fact, my best friend, she was on a trip recently, and she called me from Mexico, and I was like, "Why are you calling me? What's wrong? Is everything okay?" And she called me sobbing, and she was in tears, and she just said, "I just finished your book, and I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you, and I love you, and I miss you." And yeah, so she was like, "I loved it. It was so good." And I laughed and I cried, and I was like, "Honey, you don't have to be sorry."
Right, yeah.
I was sort of shielding myself from all of that, but yeah,
Mm.
so a
Yeah,
lot of friends.
I think this is like just for myself, writing about like the issues that are very, what is the word? Difficult, I guess difficult. Like, relationships, parents, Um, that has really hindered me in writing, where I just feel like, oh, I don't want to think about this or deal with this right now, so I don't want to do this. Or like the thought of when they read this, what are they going to think? Right? I'm on Twitter, and I've seen a lot of posts from authors or writers who are just like, my family's not even talking to me anymore because of what I wrote. And so it's kind of, it's scary, and it's kind of sad how a lot of us feel like we cannot share our stories because we will be rejected from those closest to us. And that really, yeah, that's unfortunate.
It really is unfortunate because, everybody has a different experience. I
Yeah.
mean, we could, have you ever seen those events where they have some commotion happen in a room and they have everyone write about it, and you get 50 different perspectives on
Yes.
what just happened.
Right.
You experience things totally different than I do. And it is sad that people don't feel like it's okay to share what happened to them,
Right.
because you have to process it and experience it for yourself.
Right. But you know what? I think it's really tricky because you know how your developmental editor
Hmm.
said, take out the judgment. I think that's really hard for people. And so, yeah, you might really get, if you're trying to write something and you're trying to publish it on a blog or make it public, it can be kind of tricky to write objectively. I don't know if you could ever write objectively about a personal experience, then have it kind of soaked in all the emotion, because that can get you into a lot of trouble if you're too one-sided.
Hmm.
If you maybe try to, and it's obvious when you're reading, if someone's reading your piece, that you're trying to see it from the other person's perspective also, it can be easier to swallow for people. But when it's all like your, that can make it seem like, yeah, you're bitter or,
Yeah, she said, believe me, we feel this emotion. You don't have to tell us. The
mm,
scene shows it. She said, you don't need to add in these lines about how you felt about it. We feel it just based on what you wrote in the scene.
okay,
So
that's interesting.
yeah, strip out those moments of judgment there. And
So the scene, okay, let's talk about that. The scene shows it. So is that like the whole thing of show not tell?
yeah, exactly.
Mm, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think I was doing sort of both. I was having the scene that showed that, and then I was saying, I was adding these characteristics onto my mom's tone, and she was like, "You don't need to do that. That's really more of a judgment on your part."
Mm,
And we see it. We see it and we feel it in the scene that you wrote.
right. Yeah. So I'm thinking of saying something like, my mother said this bitterly, or
Right.
yes.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. Got that. That's that. So tell me, what was the biggest lesson you learned about writing?
Oh man, I think the 9 month class that I went through, I really thought that I was taking it to do for the critique of it, because it's structured critique and feedback sessions every like
Yeah.
3 weeks out of the month, and what I got from the course was so much more than that, because the first week of the month, everything there was a lesson. We either talked about dialogue or setting the scene or how to do flashbacks, how to do flash forwards. And it kind of gave me almost like an education in writing
Yeah.
during that time of things that maybe I was doing, but I learned how to do better.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that was so I really feel like I learned a lot about just writing in general and how to really structure a book, how to get the reader in, how to craft that narrative arc, how to, have that kind of highlight point and end. And
Mm-hmm.
now I am writing the book of fiction that I've always kind of thought that I'd write, and I have all that foundation in place. So even though I've been kind of writing and rewriting little sections here and there and
Mm-hmm.
tinkering with it in my head, I feel like I have a much better foundation going into the process so that I can finish and have a good story.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind did it when you were going through that, was it a 9-month course?
Hmm.
Did you at all like think, oh yeah, I remember this from high school. I remember learning this in like whatever, seventh grade. Because I think it's so funny, like because I'm an English teacher, and a lot of the things that that I'm teaching in high school, they had learned like in elementary or middle school, but they had forgotten. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember. I don't think it ever really changes. Like it's so interesting how we can learn something and then forget, and then you just need to be reminded
Right.
of it. Yeah,
Because you don't use it, you know.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. So, what advice would you have for someone who is wanting to do what you do? Let's say they're traveling and they want to publish their story. What's
Hmm.
like the most, or maybe two pieces, not the most, but the two pieces of advice you would have for people?
So, I mean, if you're going to be a travel blogger, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously you need a blog and have some kind of draw to that, right? And travel's a great one, especially right now with everybody being stuck at home. Having those stories about places around the world and different things to do is fantastic. Read other blogs, read other successful blogs, and tailor
Mm.
yourself after that. You have your own spin on things, but look at what's working. Look at what's drawing other people in. Um, not to copy it, but definitely to see what's working and what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
would be one. And if you plan to come home and put that into a book form, read, read.
Yeah.
Read Cheryl Strait and read Liz Gilbert and
Yeah.
read different travel, read Vagabonding and On the Road and all the
Yeah.
travel books that you can find to see what they're doing, because it's not just about the travel. You know, Cheryl Strait wrote about hiking the trail, but it's not a book about hiking the trail. It's a book about her processing of her mother's death.
Right, right, right. I was going to ask you, I'm glad you mentioned the reading because I was going to ask, did you have any like go-to books for inspiration?
Oh, I don't have anyone in particular. I read a lot.
Hmm.
I probably read at least a book or two a week. So
Hmm.
it's hard to pull just one. But
Mm-hmm.
I definitely, whenever I'm trying to write, I read in that genre a lot.
Hmm.
So right now, as I'm embarking on this work of fiction, I'm trying to read a lot of different things, and people, my critique group especially, has said, oh, this sounds a lot like this author, you should go read his books. And so I've been reading his books because the way that he tells his story is similar to the way that I'm telling my story, at least right now as I start out in the process. So being able to see what other people have done successfully definitely helps craft your writing.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And sometimes I like to, if I'm reading, if I come across a really like beautifully written passage, I'll make note of that passage. And sometimes I keep this like Google Doc of just passages from works that I've read that are inspiring. And if I need some inspiration, I'll just go through and read those different passages from various even like newspaper articles, not just books, but newspaper articles, magazine articles. There's just so
Hmm.
much inspiration everywhere.
I do something really similar to that. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, so which is why I
Mhm.
can get through so many books, because I listen when I'm doing
Yes.
dishes or walking. And
Yeah.
um I if I hear a line that I think, oh, that's a brilliant line,
Yeah.
I'll bookmark it and like type it in there, and just sometimes I'll go back through those and it'd be like, oh, right, yeah, that's the one. That's the one I was looking for. And I
Yeah.
can kind of put a similar thing in my own
Yes.
work,
Yeah.
not stealing words, but
Right.
just the emotion that it evokes to
Hmm.
get those words on the paper. That's really
Exactly.
helpful. That's a great inspiration.
Yeah. And I like it. I like doing that because, as you say, it's not copying. You're looking at how they did what they did.
Hmm.
And how can you do something similar? Not saying what they said, but how did they say it?
Hmm.
And it's a great lesson. It's just a great education to be able to go through and kind of like analyze what they're doing and how it's done.
Hmm.
And audiobooks, I love. So are you doing an audio version of your book?
I don't know. I do have a studio here in town that does audiobooks for me for when my authors want to do that. I haven't decided yet.
I think that would be
It's
a great idea.
it's definitely available in both hard copy and ebook, but audiobook, maybe I will.
Yeah, because audiobook is now my book of choice because I have a long commute to and from work. And so yeah, I get through a lot of books. And plus, as I age, my eyes just are not like what they used to be, and it's just
Right.
easier for me to consume I want to say audibly, but that's the name of the company. What is the word? Is it
Yeah,
audibly?
audibly. Yeah.
It
The
is?
company's Audible.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The company is Audible, right? But anyways, it's easier for me to consume audibly than it is to, to read. For
Oh, me too, for sure, because I spend my whole day on the computer, so it's hard to like pick up a book and read at night.
right, yeah. So that would be wonderful if you could make an audio
Yeah.
version. Would you do it yourself, or would you like have an actress
I
do it?
think I would hire somebody to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if my voice is the best voice for that. But
Now, so what is the do you see, and I know I'm looking way into the future, maybe not even way into the future, but do you ever like think my story could make a great film?
hmm. Yeah. I mean it
Mhm.
definitely could. It would be a lot of locations. It would be an
Yeah.
expensive film. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Oh my gosh. And then thinking of like who would play the lead. I know we're just totally like dreaming right now, but that would be that's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that would be it. That would be like a dream. I don't know if the memoir would, but I actually think the book of fiction that I have would make a good movie too. So
Mm.
we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to be another several years before that comes out as well.
I forgot about the 5-year process. Yeah.
Oh man, it's a long process, and I'm really committed this year to marketing the book that's out there now before I really dive really hard into the book of fiction. But I do see that I do see potentially going through the same process for the book of fiction. I
Mhm.
plan to jump back into the 9-month program just to have that structured critique and
Mm.
feedback every
Yeah.
month. And then I would assume it'll go through the same process, critique and feedback, developmental editor.
Elisa, let's talk about marketing since you mentioned marketing. That's a huge thing, right? So how did you or how are you marketing your current book?
So, for both myself and for all of my authors, I have a marketing plan set up. And it's, as you can imagine, it has several prongs to it. So, one of the things we do is we always recommend doing a launch and we advertise for the launch on, all the typical
Yeah.
places and talking to friends and having friends and family support your launch. I do postcards for all the books that I do with all of the sales information on the back, and we send that to all the local bookstores in the like this 5-state area. And
Hmm.
depending on where you live, I have different lists where we can do that. Um, I I market myself on social media. I market myself on podcasts. I just have really been hitting the podcast scene pretty hard lately.
Hmm.
Um, I'm always looking for marketing opportunities to help
Hmm.
put the
Hmm.
book out because whether you publish traditionally or through a small press or independently, you have to be willing to go and put yourself out there and do the marketing for your book.
Right. Yeah.
You may get some budget for that, if you're traditionally published, but you're still going to have to do a lot of the legwork and put yourself out there yourself.
Well, and your blog is part of marketing,
Yep.
right?
Yep. I'm
Um,
writing about that. And I have several different websites. I have an author page and then I have the travel blog. But on my author page, like this podcast, I'll write a post up there and put the link to this up there so that people
oh,
can see the press that
yay.
I've been doing
Yeah.
and hopefully, generate more viewers for you too.
Yeah. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah. What about book tours? I know it's
Well,
kind of COVID-y, but
I know
COVID.
it's really hard right now.
Yeah.
So
I've heard
when the
of coaches doing digital book tours.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like that's a little bit what this is, to
Yeah.
some degree. And there's another book that just came out recently about a family who traveled around the world. And I plan to, pitch them and say, let's do something together. So who knows?
Mhm. Mm. That's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I saw something about a recipe. You were writing a recipe
That's
book.
another book I have in the works. Yes.
Okay.
So I love cooking and I love soup. of all the weird
Oh,
things that you can imagine.
yeah.
And so I have decided to put together a cookbook anthology, which is
Mhm.
all about soup and soup recipes and stories that go along with that. So like 1,500 word essays. So it'll be a collaborative project with many different authors.
So, just an anthology, a recipe anthology of soups.
Soup. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know there were so many soups.
There are. There. You'd be amazed at the varieties of soup out there. But
Wow. I mean, and you've already collected, I mean,
yeah,
obviously you travel. Oh, wow.
yeah, I have quite a bit. So I had sort of thought that I might be able to publish that this fall, but I'm realizing that in, testing all the recipes and really kind of honing those recipes is taking a little longer
Oh,
than I
yeah.
really had imagined. So
Oh, yeah.
I'll probably look to get that one done next fall of 2022.
And I could see that. I could see some type of like nonfiction about soups around the world linked somehow to your personal.
There actually is going to be a soups around the world, and I will probably pull some stories that we had that didn't make the book, that ended up on the cutting room floor. So
Yeah,
I think that for sure there will be some more excerpts in there from our travels as well.
that would be cool. And then launch your Food Network soup cooking show.
Yeah.
That would be, but it's so amazing how like there are so many different avenues you could take with the travel writing, right? You can
Hmm.
write about the food, you can write about the music, you can write about the culture, obviously, the people, the fashion. There are just so many different ways you could take it.
Right. So actually, this my writing coach, she runs the 9 month program, and then she and I have sort of created sister businesses, and we do a lot of combined training and classes for people. But last spring, she and I had planned a trip to Chile, and
Hmm.
we were going to take a group of writers to Chile, to Valparaiso, Chile, and every day there would be in the morning time a lesson. So, for instance, one day we would talk about writing character, and there'd be a whole lesson on writing about character. And then
Hmm.
as we go out and we explore the city that day, we would sit for somewhere and find a character to write about. And then we come back in the evening and drink wine and share our stories about character. And the next day might be about some particular place. So that is coming up. We had to cancel last spring, but we have re-upped it for this winter. So hopefully we're going to go in early December. That's the plan right now, as long as things continue to improve. But she and I will be taking a group of writers there to learn about that craft and really honing in on all those pieces, scenery, place,
Mm.
character, dialogue, and
Yeah.
then and having a fabulous tour of Chile while we're at it.
That is a fabulous idea. Oh my goodness. And that sounds so much fun. That's
Yeah.
like really just diving in, right? Just,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh my goodness. I had the thought while you were talking, ice creams around the world.
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't that be delicious? Oh my goodness.
Yes. You gotta find the story behind that too. And so all these stories that I've been asking people to send, some people talk about their childhood and when this particular soup was served. And so they craft these stories around a particular soup, and
Mm,
they're really good. I'm really
yeah.
I'm really excited about this project, even though it's taken a little longer than I anticipated.
Oh yeah. Because I'm getting excited. I don't even know that much about it, but I'm really just hearing you talk about it.
Well, and soup is so forgiving, right? If you screw up
Mm,
soup, it's easy to fix. If it gets too salty, you
yeah.
add a potato or more water. And if you need more flavor, you do this and that and the other thing to it. I mean, it's a very forgiving thing. And I think that we've moved in our society from a place that where it used to be sort of like special to go out to eat.
Yeah.
Now that's like the everyday. Now I think we've moved to a place where it's really special if you can cook a meal for people.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
kind of flip-flopped. And I
Right.
think that young people, we've done a really disservice to young people because they don't know how to cook. And so my plan for the book is it's going to start off very easy and get a little bit more complex in the recipes and then have a round the world section.
Mhm,
So,
mhm. And you know what else food is? I mean food, but soup, comforting.
Oh, it's
I
so
think
good.
it's a comfort food for a lot of people. And
Hmm.
so just that element, just because when you hear soup, period, well, when I hear the word soup, I just think of like my mother taking care of me when I was sick. I think of like warm, cozy days when it's cold outside, right? So that's, yeah, just that word soup is loaded with all kinds of connotations for people.
Right. And it's not going out of style. I mean, any restaurant you go into, there's a
Hmm.
soup of the day. I mean,
Right.
what
Yeah.
that's not going away
Yeah.
anytime soon. So
Yeah.
I think that there's a good market out there for soups.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Lisa, now that we've made everyone hungry, I have had so much fun
Yeah, me too.
talking with you. This is wonderful. Tell us where we can find you.
So you can find my author page. It's lisa-dailey.com, lisa-dailey.com. And my travel blog is called Northwest Rambles. So
Mhm.
that's out there. And then my two companies, is Silent Sidekick, which I do website design, typically for a lot of authors and small businesses.
Mhm.
And then Sidekick Press is my publishing company. These are the books I've published back here,
Oh,
all on
cool.
my wall.
Yeah.
And I have several more coming out this year. And I really focus on memoir, some anthologies. I do quite a few anthologies, poetry, and then some fiction, if as
Mm.
long as it's like pretty ready to go. When
Mhm.
I accept manuscripts, they have to be in a pretty good state. I don't do a heavy edit on them. I have all the staff that comes in and does everything, but you need to be pretty polished and ready to go. So like as I did my book, that state of getting through all the revision, developmental edit, calling it done, that's about the state where I take on authors for the publishing.
Right. Yeah. And I
So
just thought of one more thing before we end. Oh, wait,
yeah,
you were gonna say something?
I was just going to say silentsidekick.com and sidekickpress.com.
Right. Yes, that is Silent Sidekick and Sidekick Press. Got
Yes.
that right. Okay. I wanted to before we go because you mentioned editing. It's super important, right? Because I think a lot of writers feel I don't know if an editor is maybe too expensive for them or they feel they don't need an editor, but I've read quite a few mostly self-published books where there was no editing, and it can be very difficult for the reader. I think that as a writer, your job really is to just make your writing readable.
Right.
You want it to be clear for the reader. So what advice do you have for writers when it comes to editing?
Find a good editor.
Yeah,
Find a good editor for sure.
yeah,
Um, and really, like my press has a style guide, right? So
yeah,
that we adhere to, and we use the Chicago Manual of Style to for all of our rules, because there are a lot of rules when it comes to the English language, and
yeah.
so we try to adhere to most of that. Um, so editing, getting that good editor in there, and then really getting a good proofreader. And your publisher should have a proofreader on staff too that goes through everything, as I do. Um, but you really, even if you think you don't need an editor, you need an editor. In fact, a book that just hit the New York Times bestseller, I was reading, and there they mentioned a location from a movie, and I was like, "Oh, that's wrong.
Mm,
That's
mhm,
wrong."
mhm.
It was just straight up wrong place, and I thought, "Ooh,
Yeah.
who was their editor? Because they didn't catch that."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. And you mentioned proofreader, right? So there is a difference between the editor and the proofreader. So the editor would catch something like that location error and they're more content based, whereas the proofreader just basically looking for the errors and punctuation, grammar, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and consistency throughout. I mean, my proofreader does some editing as well,
Yeah.
where she says, I think it would sound better if we did this. So she puts in those. Usually, when it gets to the proofreader, I go back to the author and say, here was some suggestion. And we have a discussion about it. How do you feel about changing this to
Hmm.
kind of match with what you've written elsewhere, or to kind of go with the flow? But your reading should definitely be easy. You don't want your reader to stumble
Hmm.
over words, or
Right.
stumble over things that aren't quite right. You want to you because it tires you out. If
It
the
does,
reader
yeah.
is tired, they're not going to keep turning pages.
Exactly. And you mentioned the Chicago Manual of Style, which I think is a great book to have if you're a writer.
Yes,
A copy of that for sure. Yeah, that's great.
absolutely.
And I think another point that you're making is to be, what is the word? You mentioned it earlier. Oh, don't have thin skin, be thick skinned when it comes to
Right.
editing and getting
So
feedback.
yeah, I think it is a vulnerable process for writers when they first put their work out into the world.
Hmm.
But if you have a great critique group
Hmm.
and you take it in the spirit of critique, that
Hmm.
that your partners out there are really giving you feedback on your writing,
Right.
not you as a person, on your writing, and they're trying to help your words improve,
Hmm.
get you, elevate you to a new level, then I think it's a little bit easier to do that. So the rejection letters are a little bit hard, but I always try to look at it and be like, well, they're not a great fit for me. They're not the right fit. I'll find somebody else.
Mm.
And I could have kept going down that path, but I thought, well, since I now have this publishing company, I'll just do it myself.
Exactly. Why not?
Why not?
Lisa, thank you so much for your
Thank
time. It's
you.
great.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I love this. I love Lisa's story because it reminds me of Tommy McAnjula, who I interviewed a few episodes back, because they both took their blogs and created books from their blogs. So Tommy McAnjula took her food blog, her recipe blog, and repurposed that into cookbooks. And Lisa has taken her travel blog and repurposed it into a memoir. And I know there are a lot of writers and bloggers and all kinds of genres, whether you're writing about travel or fashion or food or motherhood or fatherhood, whatever. You can take blog posts, find a story arc, and voila, repurpose it into a memoir or whatever. So if you want to learn more about Lisa, then please check out her websites. They are listed in the show notes and on Zazo.com. And speaking of Zazo.com, make sure you sign up for my weekly newsletter. Actually, it's more bi-weekly now, but sign up for my newsletter and follow me on social media. Also follow Lisa on social media if you can find her. I'm sure you can find her on her website, her social media. And thank you so much for tuning in. And I look forward to sharing next week with you when I talk to another fabulous person. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.